Now, Troy Buswell is the Housing Minister and he's the architect of the government's hardline approach. I spoke with him earlier. Mr Buswell, welcome to 730 WA.
Thanks very much.
Mr Buswell, can you tell me how many families have been made homeless by this policy?
Well, since we changed and strengthened the three strikes policy in May last year, we're probably looking at about 5 or 6 evictions a month as a result of the policy, maybe a little bit less some months, but that's sort of an average. So you're probably looking 40 or 50 since May last year.
So how many children have been made homeless by this policy?
Oh, look, I don't have that information available, but no doubt some would have been. We try really hard when children are involved to engage with Family and Children's Services and other government support agencies to try and minimise the impact on them. But look, there's no doubt that families with children have been evicted, and the reason is that families with children are having a huge impact on the neighbourhoods in which they live.
When people misbehave in a public house, why is it a reasonable thing that children should be made homeless as a consequence of that?
Well, it's a reasonable thing for tenants of public houses not to destroy the lives of their neighbours. And you have to remember, I mean, to get 3 strikes issued against you under this policy requires a fair degree, in fact, it requires a significant degree of negative impact on your neighbourhood. Now, we don't just turn up and kick people out. I look at it from the other side of the coin, I suppose, and say if that household and the people in that household are having a devastating impact on their neighbourhoods and in particular on their immediate
But in some
neighbours.
cases it's not devastating, in some cases it's just a nuisance. Why should the penalty for being a nuisance be homelessness, particularly if you're a child?
If the person is of a view that the reason they're being evicted is only of a nuisance value, they should go to court and have that tested, because I would struggle to find a situation where you get 3 strikes if you're not having a significant impact on your neighbourhood. And I know there are people who are evicted and it causes them difficulties. But I can tell you, I've had people who have had mental breakdowns, whose quality of life has been ruined. I met a lady from Bunbury who was forced to live in her car at the beach because her neighbours had impacted on her life that much. I'm not going to let that happen. And I've given commitments to those people that we will help to protect them in their neighbourhoods by insisting on better standards of behaviour for our tenants.
But are you not troubled, Minister, that by meeting that commitment you're forcing other families to live in their cars?
Well, of course I'm concerned if that's happening, but I think this policy is the right policy. And where it is the case, where children are involved, we try and provide adequate levels of support, notwithstanding the fact that the people can no longer stay in that house.
How are we to take that seriously when you don't even know how many kids have been made homeless by this? I would have thought surely as Housing Minister, 12 months into this policy, you'd know exactly how many children have been made homeless.
I know how many people have been evicted, and again, obviously, some of those would have been families with children. However, and when that happens, we try and provide adequate level of support so that those people can transition into whatever form their new housing takes. But I make no apologies for the fact that if you want to be one of our tenants and you want to ruin the lives of people in your neighbourhood, there's a strong probability that you'll get evicted. Now, I think we have an obligation to protect neighbours and communities from some behaviour that you could only describe as horrific.
What obligation do we have to those children? That's the question I'm asking you. I mean, you're talking about a government approach to this, but where is the evidence of a cross-government approach on dealing with these children and making sure that they're not just cast into the street?
Well, the evidence is that the department engages with other areas of government to provide that level of support to children. As their families have to transition into an alternate form of housing. Now, sometimes that alternate form of housing is with friends and relatives temporarily. Sometimes it's in another form of accommodation, may even be in crisis accommodation. But at the end of the day, people do have to take responsibility for their actions. And if your action is that you think it's acceptable to ruin the lives of people living around you, there is a consequence.
What about Indigenous families? They tend to be larger than other non-Indigenous families. They seem to be disproportionately affected by this policy. Are you monitoring how many Indigenous families are being kicked out under this?
Well, we got some figures a while back. I haven't seen recent stats, and that was really to assist the opposition with some of their inquiries. It's very hard for us to get accurate figures because a lot of people, you're not required to indicate Aboriginality or not when you apply, and so I couldn't accurately say.
If there's only 5 a month, surely
we can get a guideline, but I've never asked for that information because I don't think it's important. I don't think it's important to understand the circumstances of each person that we evict. What I think is important, I mean, I'm sure the department are cognizant of some of the facts we've talked about, like children and with cases of domestic violence. What I'm interested in is making sure that our tenants, irrespective of who they are good neighbours. Talking
to an Aboriginal elder, he said that in many ways this feels like an echo of the stolen generation for him, that you're creating an evicted generation of young people whose lives have been turned upside down by this process. Have you contemplated the possibility that 10 or 15 years from now somebody might be making an apology for this policy?
No.
I mean, you're making no apology for it now, but are you thinking that this might be a well-intentioned but ill-conceived idea that will play out badly for future generations?
No, I don't think it'll play out badly. And I think what we're saying to people is you need to take responsibility for what happens in the home that effectively the taxpayer provides you with a subsidy. If you accept responsibility for your behaviour and your impact on your tenants, on your neighbours, then you'll have no problem.
Mr. Buswell, thanks for your time.
No, thank you very much.